Great to have you with us today here on the Public Square. I'm Wayne Shepherd. We've got a full table. Dave Zanotti is here, of course. Rob Walgate is fresh from taking down the tent. And Jeff Sanders is here. Melanie Elsey, Alan C. Duncan is here. And Anna Welch joins us at the table today as well. And we're asking, have you read any good books lately?
Yeah, we've got microphones everywhere today, Wayne. And we're coming through the wonderful celebration of Declaration 250. It's not over. We're still in the 250th year, which means we're still keeping our eyes on the Atlantic, formerly known as the Atlantic Monthly, which is the oldest continuing publication on a monthly basis that's been going on and considers itself to be sort of the moral conscience of American culture since they've been there the longest in regards to a periodical. And so they sort of pride themselves as having the senior status to define, to control, to facilitate the debate about what is America. That pretty much is what they define themselves as. Their core purpose is to be the place where America is defined and debated. And they agree that that's going to always be a point of contention. They're not suggesting that they have the final word, but they do feel that they have the moral authority to construct the debate. And therefore, we take them seriously because academia takes them seriously. I would venture to guess if we could, I'm not asking for this, nor would I ever attempt to get it, but if we did have a list of their subscribers, that there would be a lot of college and university professors and addresses, including public libraries, et cetera, around the country, where these folks are definitely designed to attempt to reach the folks that are thinking and talking and doing in regards to American government.
I know of some pastors as well that would be among that readership, and so, but maybe a little bit more on that later.
So we've been watching, and you'll remember that when we started very early to try to define one lane, if you will, for a discussion of Declaration 250, that the Atlantic entered very quickly thereafter. I'm not suggesting there was any correlation between our activity and theirs or that they even know that we exist. But the fact is that we began to watch them because of their definitive position, and that we very quickly could see that they were going to be utilizing a strategy of deferring, of distraction, of in essence, keeping us from talking about the core document and keeping us talking inside their frame of reference. And so we called them out right from the beginning in that regard. And we've been watching, we all subscribe here, we've been watching what they've been doing quite a bit ever since. And so it dawned on me I should check their July edition, 2026, and see what there was. And to my stunned amazement, the front cover of the Atlantic for July in the Declaration 250 year is a full print rendition of the hymnal page, all 5 verses of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Of course, the Battle Hymn of the Republic was nowhere to be found on the 4th of July, 1776. And it's basically a document and an artistic expression dealing with the period of the Civil War, which led us to a conclusion that Alan introduced in staff, and I'm not going to try and say it for you. Tell me what you said, because it seemed like you summarized about 18 months of research in about 2 sentences.
Well, reading through that issue of The Atlantic, it struck me that for liberals or for progressives, America doesn't begin until after the Civil War.
The pause is for effect. America doesn't begin until, let's say, at mid-stride or certainly after the Civil War. That is and I'll bet you that there have been people who've been saying that, and I never heard it before. But I thought, Wayne, that was said amazingly well.
Yeah.
And as such, then we talked about that a long time today, and with many different variations about wanting to talk about it in the future. But after listening to everybody, it dawned on me that maybe I could look at it and say, as that glass being half empty, or I could say, well, maybe the Atlantic is now halfway home. Because when you read the 5 verses that they've printed on the front cover of their magazine, the 5 verses of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, this is a conversation about Jesus Christ and about God as the ultimate judge of humanity.
It can't have escaped them, right?
Yeah, well, it's maybe they're halfway home in regards to what is America really? What is this proposition? What is this creed? What is this all about? So the debate is going to clearly continue, and I think we're going to be continually confused by the Atlantic because they're kind of still all over the place. And it's almost now like their mantra isn't to ever finally discover the truth, but just simply to agree to disagree. Okay. And again, you could say, well, that might be part of the conversation as well. But I would like to remind everyone, as we're going to switch to a different subject in just a second, but whether it's the Atlantic or your college professor or you as a professor or you as a member of the clergy or you as a mom or a dad or you as just a good old-fashioned, everyday working-class citizen like all the rest of us, the Declaration talks about something called self-evident truth. If self-evident truths do not exist, then the premise of America is really quite farcical. Just doesn't make any sense at all. So for our purpose, the lane that we will continue to pursue in regards to the Declaration of Independence, the existence of the American promise and premise, is that self-evident truth does exist and that it is transcendent. It begins outside of us, and that we are a part of that created order, not the recreators of it. So that's where we go. And so let's switch to the August episode.
Okay, before we do, can I ask a question? Is there any explanation in the July edition of why they chose the cover they did?
They liked the song, and to be honest with you, I think that after having read everything, Alan really summarized it best. Huh. They really only want to talk about America post-1860.
Okay, all right.
They don't mention the Declaration and the Declaration issue, do they?
I'm not sure that, again, I read it, but it's hard for that. It takes a lot of reading and a lot of red marking. I didn't find much, if anything at all, about the Declaration in their July edition.
For an edition that's supposed to be at the time period of us celebrating.
Right on the mark,
250 years.
Well, this is the disadvantage of having an online version and not seeing the cover. So thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Well, and it may just be that it was the easiest way to change the subject. I don't know.
Silence is deafening.
Yeah, which we anticipated would be the strategy of many people on progressive left because and look, full disclosure, here's a surprise. If you've been listening at any point in time at all, we believe in what we call the God-filled equation versus the God-less equation. And it is crystal clear that the realm of the Democrat Socialists of America, the progressive antecedents to that movement, and in essence of the same family going the whole way back, not just to Karl Marx, not just to Darwin. I mean, the concept of the godless equation has been around since the Garden of Eden. And there were people who at the time of the signing of the Declaration wanted no part of it because they wanted no part of the God that's mentioned 4 times inside that document. We get this. Like it or lump it, it's a religious conversation. You can't escape that reality unless you choose to change the subject.
Well, for us, at this moment in time, it's still July, but in the magazine world, it's August. So what's on the Atlantic's mind in August?
So, and this one is incredibly intriguing. The headline, here's the story, cover story. The age of reading is over.
Period.
The age of reading.
That's a declarative statement, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's the lead article, by the way, as well. So I know, Wayne, it wasn't going to take you long if I show you this. You're going to say, excuse me, wait a second. Continue. You see the inconsistency of it, I'm gathering. This is supposed to be the oldest publication in existence in America, and they're declaring their own death. Is that what this is?
Which people read,
Yeah. This is not the Braille version, okay? This is not the digital eyeglasses version. I mean, it's...
I must confess, I did listen to this. I did listen to the article. There's
way to
audio.
go, Alan.
You're out. Out the door, through the window,
you just
Wayne.
blew the
He's
whole
out.
premise.
Okay. All right.
Because I'm reading other things, okay? That's my defense. I had a long car ride.
Yeah.
So this is the subject of today's conversation, and the article is written by Rose Horowitz, who is a fascinating person, very accomplished at a very young age. To have her article as the cover of Atlantic, and she's in her 20s.
Wow.
It is remarkable. Now, of course, one of the first things I can tell you is that she can write long enough articles for the Atlantic. I think this one was 53 minutes audio version.
It was.
I'm 2.5 times into it, which means I'm like almost hitting the 3-hour threshold.
The end of reading is here.
Yeah.
But we're going to try and change that with this one article.
Yeah. If you weren't sick of reading before the article, you will be when you're done with it.
I took the article title as a challenge. You know,
I
you
like
listen
that.
to it, but
Yeah.
I said, no, it's not. I'm going to sit down and read this whole thing, even if it takes me an hour.
I appreciate that.
Of course, Wayne, the voice of Anna Welch, who takes everything in this regard, whether it's photography, art, graphics, or reading, as a challenge. This is a person who went to a noted United States university. As a freshman, was able to take a course in symbolic logic, which is forbidden without presidential exemption, passed the course with an A and said, okay, can we do something else now?
Yeah.
So yes, she would take the challenge.
No surprise at all. Okay, we're going to get into this here today with you on the Public Square, so stay tuned for the whole conversation with the whole panel here coming up in just a moment.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
In this digital world, is reading a thing of the past? Let's talk about it now with the panel here in the Public Square. Jeff, you have a comment or question, or what do you have, Jeff?
Well, just basically a summary. If you haven't read the article, it's almost like a funeral dirge of how in the past 60 years ago, we were reading much more substantively and much more volume than what we are reading today. It's like people simply are not reading newspapers, magazines, from a magazine article, the month of the Atlantic, novels, much of anything, actually.
Well, I think we've shifted to a headlines culture where we've tried to capture what someone's trying to say just in the headline itself or the immediate one or two sentences below a headline, and then we move on. It's like our attention span has changed. And it's notable that in this whole article that she's provided, she refers to a New York Times survey where it states that more than 80% of elementary school teachers said students receive school-issued devices by the time they enter kindergarten. So really it's a shift to tech as opposed to not having a desire to read. It's a shift in how they accomplish teaching, learning, just informing yourself through print material.
I think something we all might agree on is the trend of seeing young people, old people, all types of people on their phones more, on their devices more. You might be reading, but a lot of times you're scrolling social media or watching videos, and that time you could be reading during that time, but we're spending our time elsewhere.
Well, and it's the same with video content because we say we shouldn't post something like even David Plouffe in the Obama campaign stated that your content, we need to create content, but the length of it should be about 10 seconds for TikTok. So it's not just what we're reading, it's the attention span on video format or print.
That was I thought the strongest part of the article was when she was talking about what reading gives you that other forms of ingesting media does not give you. Because obviously we're doing a podcast, a radio broadcast right now. When people aren't reading this, they're listening to it. We do videos as well, so it's not as though we're opposed to these things. We watch films and do these things. But reading, if you lose the ability and the will to read as a culture or as a people, you can't think as deeply about topics. It gives you the ability to think more deeply, to go deeper, to lay out full thoughts in a way that other forms of media simply don't. I thought that was probably the best part of the article to me.
Do we disagree? I mean, in the sense that I think that there's a lot in this article that we agree with, is that there's a definite decline in reading and reading comprehension, and that it is concerning. It's to the point of alarm that The Atlantic, which obviously needs readers, is saying that the age of reading is over. So instead of the age of magazines or periodicals is over, the age of reading is over. Well, wait a second. The reading, according to this article, as well as a little bit more research, has been around for in the neighborhood of 6,000 years. Really?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can go all the way back. The ancient Phoenicians created the alphabet, but writing goes back earlier than that. Somewhere early, like 2500 BC, you had the invention of cuneiform, which was you call it the alphabet, the pictographs created by the Sumerians and the Babylonians in Mesopotamia. And you can find written language in China and the peoples of India as well, because people want to communicate their ideas from today to future generations. They want to preserve this.
Well, and I think it goes back to the comprehension as well, because I think of, what we're reading today, if we're scrolling quickly or looking at headlines, it plays into the emotion, and we've become such an emotional people and a reactionary people on what we see and it grabbing our attention. I mean, I'm reminded often of the policy briefings I've sat through with Melanie Elsie, where she's shown questions that were asked on tests 40 years ago, 50 years ago, compared with the questions that are asked today. And it's clear that comprehension is not expected today the way it was years ago.
She goes there in this article. She refers back to test results from 2024, where she says in a national test, just 35% of high school seniors were proficient. I know we're not going to cover this in this broadcast, and we've done it in broadcasts past, but I hope our listeners will always remember that when they say a percentage of students are proficient, you have to get behind that number, because the cut scores make the picture even worse. Because proficient in Ohio, for example, is defined as getting about 38% of the questions correct. Oh. So we wouldn't even say proficient is proficient. So, I mean, there's two layers to that statement. So you have the capacity to learn how to read before you can move on from decoding and being able to read the printed word to comprehension and other skills related to comprehension.
Also, she talks about, and this is something we've talked about on the show prior, is your brain, when you're reading something online or on your phone, is not able to absorb as much as the content and comprehend as much content as opposed to when you have a book in your hands or paper in your hands. That's different. Your brain just absorbs it differently.
Am I too old school if I say that whenever I see something online, I have to actually print it so I can mark it up and highlight it and take notes?
Well,
I can't absorb and retain unless I'm taking notes.
I was going to bring that up, Melanie, because I was thinking how painful it would be for Dave Zanotti not to have a book to mark up. So
every single book that I am reading, I take notes on it, because that I have to interact with it. What does the author mean by this? And I try to apply it to something in my life. It doesn't matter if it was written 2,000 years ago.
Well, on the phone, when you're trying to do it on a phone, right, there's so many things on that phone that can be the distraction.
Yeah.
It's the reason I don't even, I personally, I know my limitations. I don't take my phone into church with me anymore, because I'm not going to look at the Bible on my phone in church, because I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to drift.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy you a steno pad so that when you're in church, you can sit there and take notes.
Well, I do.
Okay.
I still feel guilty reading the Bible on my phone in church, because I feel like I need to tell everybody this is the Bible app. I'm not texting, I promise.
All right, so this article is basically making the premise that we have become a post-literate culture, and that we've gone past being literate. I believe it. And that One is that we're losing the ability to read, but we're also losing the ability to understand and comprehend.
It's the thinking.
Yes.
Well, and then if you can't read, you can't write.
Yes. And it goes on, and it continues to go on. Now, let me just give you a quote here. Talking about television, and here's a quote from the article. If TV crowded out the silent time necessary for reading, broadband internet and the smartphone make it nearly impossible. Not too long ago, at-home screen entertainment was finite. Shows aired on a certain day at a certain time. If you wanted to watch an old movie, you had to put your shoes on and go to a video store. Books could compete in that environment. Some people, at least, would turn off the TV and read a book before falling asleep. In essence, reading is being pressed out of our culture. Therefore, we're forgetting how to do it. We're not doing it as a practice. And in essence, we'll get to the place where we won't be able to do it. And so the age of reading is over. Now, that is a historic statement. It is a stark statement. She likens it to the loss of the Alexandrian libraries. And what would happen if our minds basically, and this is me speaking, but she uses the illustration of the loss of the ancient Alexandrian libraries as if to say what would happen if that was what our brain looked like.
Well, it's already following the fact that the age of writing is gone. Do you know anybody under the age of 20 who can write in cursive handwriting? I know plenty of people under the age of 20. Well, okay, your children, yes.
I do.
Okay, they are learning that. I know teenagers, they can't read anything that I write in this notebook right here because it's in cursive.
I know college students that can't sign a contract with their name.
Yeah, and when it comes to reading, in my family, and I'm going to say my extended family, the only people I know who read are my wife, my 4 kids, my 2 daughters-in-law, and that's it. I'm not talking about reading a verse in the Bible now and then or every day. I'm talking about reading novels, biographies, fiction, historical documents. It is a totally foreign concept to all of them.
I have to ask you to defend that even further, Jeff. I'm one that I gave up cursive in junior high. I can read it.
Really?
I can read it, but I have not written in cursive, and I can still write in cursive if I'm forced to. My signature is not in cursive.
You understand it. So you could read the Declaration of Independence in its original form.
Right.
If you were asked to. You can do that. Generations today.
You don't think they can even read it?
I know they can't. I know that they can. If they're 16 years old, they have not been taught cursive handwriting at all, and they cannot read what I write.
Let me insert something else as...
And it's not as penmanship, Wayne.
No, yeah. Well, let me defend using electronic devices to read. I'm the oldest person on the table here, but it is much easier for me to read a book on Kindle than it is to read the print on a page. It's backlit.
Well, and this is not to say that that we're not. I think that it's possible that you're still reading. I mean, that you are still reading.
I think I'm reading more because of that. Yes,
exactly. And so it's the point of this particular article is that we are reading so much less that this author is suggesting that the age of being a literate society is over. And we are now on the vast decline. And that's the premise. And it's a very lengthy article, and we're going to talk more about it when we get back.
All right, let's take our break, and we will return to the whole panel talking about this interesting issue on the Public Square. This program is always archived at our own website, thepublicsquare.com. You can also listen on YouTube, and you can also find us as a podcast just about anywhere, The Public Square. We're talking about what some see as a decline in reading and discussing that in the Public Square here today. Why is this an issue for us, Dave?
Well, according to the author of this work in The Atlantic, what's at risk, and I quote, is nothing less than the ability to think for oneself. It's a pretty significant statement. And it's always been the idea that if I can read something, if anyone can read something, if we're all reading the same text, then you can decide what it means to you. If we're not reading any longer, then where are we getting our information from? And again, I don't know that the question is whether you're reading books or whether you're reading a text online. Or whether you're reading a formal, there are still some newspapers left in the world, or whether you're reading a magazine, we've got two of them right here in front of us from The Atlantic, or whether you're reading the stuff online. The question is, are we reading? Are we teaching people to read? Are people reading with comprehension? And it brings us to the question of what's happening in schools. Now, we're going to talk momentarily with someone who will remain pretty much anonymous, except to say that they're a school teacher on the ground, all right, in a high school in the Midwest, and that they've got an opinion on this from a lengthy experience.
Look forward to that, yeah.
But this is the age of reading is over, and this is the premise of The Atlantic. Again, the irony is stark in that this is the oldest publication still printing in America, saying basically that they're not just predicting we're not going to have a magazine anymore. This magazine gets smaller and smaller month by month. We get that. They're saying no one's going to be able to read what we write anyways. Now, is that something that we really believe is happening?
And the flip side of the same coin is, doesn't the slope become a little bit more slippery with the consideration of ChatGPT, AI? And when you're saying we have to be able to think for ourselves, that ground is almost being ceded by the changes in technology.
Yeah, now there's an interesting point, and it does come up in the article. When you add AI to it, now there's a real leverage piece as well, because now you can say, well, the smart people are paying somebody to think for them.
Right. Or even to digest what they, like if you're given a reading assignment in school, can you just not even do it? Just skip that step altogether and have an AI tech program like ChatGPT summarize it for you.
We used to call it Cliff Notes.
But even Cliff Notes, you had to sit and read the Cliff Notes.
Oh, right.
Well, Dave, you sent around another article that was kind of that agreed with the general premise of this Atlantic piece, but called into question one of the points of data that Rose Horowitz brought out, and that is, it was a comparison between what was a book that was popular in the mid 50s. I think she used Dr. Zhivago as a more complex, something more thoughtful, versus what was popular, the best-selling book in last year or something, and it was a spin-off from the Hunger Games series. And they were comparing that in terms of the complexity of one type of writing versus today. But the article you sent around kind of called that into question. It said that was a unique case. Dr. Zhivago won the Nobel Prize, popped up to the top of the reading list because it kind of caught the zeitgeist for a year. But really, if you look at it, people in the 1950s were also reading detective novels, penny dreadfuls, all kinds of little one-off books that weren't really philosophical, great literature.
Well,
either.
let me give some
Harlequin
credit.
romance.
Yeah,
sure.
Joel J. Miller, in a Substack article, he has a site called Miller's Book Review, basically says, before you panic about that Atlantic reading piece, it's easy to fear the future when we romanticize the past. And basically what he's saying is that young Rose Horowitz is basically looking at a period of life that she wasn't living in and not exactly getting the context and sort of contouring, romanticizing the Dr. Zhivago story as an example. And he goes on to say, excuse me, that was a really hot book because it was an anti-communist book in a period of anti-communism. The CIA was bumping up the book. Everybody was talking about the book.
See, conspirity theories are true.
They wanted all the foreign sales as well, right? They wanted it.
Right. I mean, and it won a Nobel Prize on top of all that. But he goes on to talk about Grandma Patty's bookshelf and basically saying, when I come to think about what I remember people reading, he goes on to the stuff like what we've been talking about, the Harlequin novels and all of that's Mickey Spillane and Peyton Place. And he talks about, now wait a second, there was a lot of stuff being read. Maybe we just don't like what have to admit we were reading. But there's a bigger question here that does not come up in either the Contrarian article or the Atlantic article, which takes us back to an earlier conversation we had back in February of this year. You can go back and look it up on the subject, Why Johnny Can't Read. In the same period of time that she's romanticizing, we had a book come out that was a #1 bestseller in America called Why Johnny Can't Read. And this goes back to 1955. And in that book, the researcher, the professor, Professor Flesch, who taught his own grandson to read phonetically in a period of 6 weeks' time, it might have been 6 days' time if I remember right, but a remarkable work. And then taught everyone how to do that and put out this book that was basically half of the story and the other half was actual phonetic training on how to teach your kids how to read. This book was a huge bestseller. He goes back to say the reading crisis in America, our illiteracy began in 1925. So we're talking about, all right, wait a second. Wait a minute. That's 100 years before the Atlantic publishes that we're post-literate. Flesch is saying back in 55, we've been going down the drain since 25.
Yeah. Well, to me, one of the things I think there's a problem in academia. This is just my personal opinion. I think there's a problem sometimes in how we teach literature. And I talked about this with Ethan. He had to read Romeo and Juliet. And it's hard for kids in middle school.
Original Shakespeare? What was he reading?
Yes, the play.
Okay.
And I told him, I said, listen, this was popular entertainment at the time it came out, and you were not supposed to read it. You were supposed to watch it and listen to it. And so I'm like, it's okay if it's a struggle for you to read. We highlight these things from the past that are supposed to be great literature, and it is, but we forget that it was also supposed to be fun. Shakespeare was fun and entertainment for people at the time. It wasn't highbrow literature. Robert Burns is now, you could study it in college. That was fun poetry for people he was like a popular figure. And so when we make stuff so academic, we forget that it's supposed to be fun. People were reading for fun in the 1950s, and they were reading some trash, but they were having fun reading. So we need to bring the fun back for especially young people, but for all of ourselves. Let's make reading fun again. Can that be a hat?
Yeah. Don Quixote. Okay, the first novel ever written.
Don Quixote? Was that a Shrek film? What are you trying to say?
Don Quixote.
Oh, okay, sorry. It's the emphasis
by Miguel Cervantes
All right.
is
that one.
It is hilarious. It is touching. It is thought-provoking. It is a wonderful, and it was written in early 1600s.
But if you have someone lecturing you on it, like
the way, the way to start a child on this is you go back and you find the old classics illustrated you can find them in old hobby cartoon toy stores, things like that, from the 1950s and 60s. And I've got a few. And you show that to your child, they will get hooked for life.
Now, I know we got to take a break, but I want to suggest that this little dialogue right here is probably an excellent way of understanding this article, because historian Dr. Jeff Sanders is a huge fan of comic books.
Yes.
With a purpose. And he just recommended going back to a comic book to learn. So in other words,
it's how I still learn.
Okay. See, it's not necessarily the method. It's, are you reading and are you comprehending? Okay. So there's something here, and I know we got a break, but there's something in let's not miss that. Even professors can say it's okay to read a comic book.
You have Jeff's permission. All right, let's take our break on the Public Square. I hope you're passing along this program as a recommendation for other listeners. You'll find that program that we're talking about, The Public Square, at thepublicsquare.com.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Back with you on the Public Square today, talking about this Atlantic article about reading, the decline of reading in their estimation. As we've had this conversation panel, I've been thinking about that wonderful library right upstairs that we have that's growing every day. So that should say something about this topic right there. Alan, you wanted to come in here.
There was one more. This is back to reading for fun. Because I have a dyslexic child, as people know, I've talked about before. So to get a dyslexic to read for fun is kind of a Herculean task. So I want to read a quick quote from this piece that just jumped out to me. It bothered me a little bit, and I'm in big agreement with this piece in general, but this part annoyed me a little bit. It's talking about, it said last year's top-selling novel was Sunrise on the Reaping, the latest in the Hunger Games young adult series, which I read the first three of those. I actually like the first one and the second one quite a bit. I think that there's some decent themes to think about in those books. But this is couched in the vein of this is something to be upset about. That's kind of how this reads. The chief librarian at the New York Public Library told me that young adult fiction is one of the library's most popular offerings, including among decidedly not young adults. I happen to love reading young adult fiction as an adult.
Because you also write young adult fiction.
I do. Yes, if we have any literary agents out there, please contact the Public Square. Yes, you've read my draft, Dave, of that offering. And so I think that there have been some fine works in young adult literature over the years. E.B. White's Charlotte's Web being one of the finest books of prose ever written. And then it goes on to say other titles include the top 10 children's books, the 20th installment of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series, which those are fun for kids to read, and Dog Man Big Jim Believes. And you're supposed to read this and think, man, we're dumb now. The Dog Man book series, there's about probably 10 or 11 in the series. That's one of the, it's kind of comic booky, Jeff, to your point. It's one of the books that Ethan could read when he was growing up. He loved those book series. It was the only thing that we could get him to read. And it was written by someone who is also dyslexic. It was a kid who was put out in the hallway in class and told that he was never going to amount to anything. And so what did he do in second grade? He invented Dog Man, and he grew up to become Dave Pilkey, who writes this best-selling series. And so the snobbery that I detect emanating from the penumbra of this article bothers me, because if you want readers to have fun reading, you can't, I'm editing myself, you can't look down your nose on the stuff that they are reading.
All right, we've got a change in the table now. We have intellectually slighted this table dramatically by having Anna and Melanie and Rachel sitting with us. Rachel Walgate is joining us. We've switched out one Walgate for the other.
Oh, some might say you upgraded Walgates. I don't know. Some might say.
And it's far more than a 2.0, I can assure you. Rachel, you're a career educator. All right, you're listening to this conversation. I know you've read the article. Mrs. Walgate, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I hope I'm not a disappointment. I don't know that I'm the better Walgate, but I have so many thoughts on this because this will be my 22nd year educating in high school. And I have to say, I didn't hear the beginning. I don't know what all Rob said. I'm always Team Rob, but hearing what I'm hearing, I'm definitely Team Alan in this. I was agreeing with every single thing, and I'm a little bit late to the party, but I agree. I think we've been taught in education as long as kids are reading. The whole premise of this is they're not reading. That's been the whole discussion. And I think Alan's correct in that we have to just get them to a book. And you know what? It might be at first something online. Do I love that? No. I think it needs to be a hard copy book. But we're going to have to meet this generation where they're at as well.
Over 22 years, have you seen a deficiency? Or what have you seen?
Absolutely. I actually made a list of words that every test I get asked. And I'm not talking history vocabulary words like mercantilism. Okay, you might not know what that word is. But when there's words in a test question that you don't know, what is an objective view? Usurped, tyranny, ensued. I can go on, and I have to interpret words in a question. There is no reading comprehension anymore. And I do think it's back to the digital age, the AI. And to Melanie's point, we at least had to read Cliff Notes. I read many Cliff Notes in my day, I hate to admit. But you did have to read it. You did have to consume it. You did have to run it through your brain as a washing machine to process something. And kids really struggle.
Let me ask this side of the table now, that what I'm sensing is that I see agreement. we're talking about post-literate. What we're talking about is not being able to understand what you're reading.
I sat in the State Board of Education meeting probably 15 years ago, and the title of the presentation by the Department of Education to the board members was Ohio's Middle School Literacy Crisis. And they defined that as students not being able to handle on a state assessment a two-part question. They couldn't get from one half of the question to the next if they needed both halves to formulate an answer. They couldn't do it.
So I think part of this starts at home, right? So one of the best things that we did early on with our kids was read to them at bed. And I know all of you have done that too.
From the day they're born.
Yes.
Yep.
From the day they're born. That is so important. I remember being in 5th grade in the public school, and every day our teacher at a certain time of the day would take a novel and she would read a portion of a chapter, and we were hanging till the next day on what would happen next. So we were 10 years old and still being read to, even though we had to learn how to read ourselves, and we had the SRA reading series and all of that.
Okay,
stuff to help
Mrs.
us.
Walgate, if you're a reader in high school today, does that automatically disqualify you from being cool?
That's hard for me to answer. I'm at a very academic school. And I will say there's been a little tiny uptick of kids that when they're done with something early, they'll get out a book. But it is very small. And it's still down from when I first started teaching. I was blown away at the amount of kids who would get a book out. I was like, wow, I am at an amazing school. These kids are reading. But it's changed from over time, less and less of the reading, getting out a device, to phones, to scrolling social media, to playing games, to gambling in school on their phone. It's almost like they're zombies.
This article points out that, according to the statistics in the Atlantic report, that more people placed a bet last year in legalized gambling than read a book. Yeah, if you forget everything else from this program, that one's going to stick with you. Yeah, the Atlantic did bring that up.
To Rachel's point, we are seeing some states and cities doing phone-free schools where you have to either keep it in a lockbox sort of situation. It can't be in the classroom. And I think you're seeing more kids come back to reading because of that. Back in the 50s,
there was a concern that television was going to make us post-literate, that television would eliminate reading. And I can understand that. Now, but so the question is really, is this entire conversation about distractions?
Yes, I do. And I started questioning all these things. Like if you go back in the beginning of this article, when she presents the lack of reading over time with the library, the Alexandria Library being destroyed, and it was a challenge to preserve it. Well, we're faced with a huge challenge in society, and what are we doing to preserve it? Because I'm as guilty as everyone. I'm a parent. My kids are teenagers. They grew up at the wrong time with those phones in their hand before we really saw the addictive nature. It's hard as an adult, but those are distractions that who is picking up a book? We're really not. And kids definitely aren't, I can tell you that. And they do not know how to comprehend information. And when I teach every day and I have a reading assignment, no, maybe it's not exciting for most kids to read some stuff out of the book and take notes. I get that. But they don't see the importance of having to do it. They will AI it. There are so many ways I try and hold them accountable. And we're talking, I have smart kids. These are not kids that don't know how to read, but they don't know how to process information.
Let's take a break and more from Rachel, our guest here on the program today, and more from the panel on this topic. We're talking about this article in the Atlantic, and we'll get back to the conversation in a moment. If you have to leave us at this time, if your station cuts away, you can always catch the rest online, the Public Square. We've been talking about the problem, and we've defined the problem here today. What are the solutions? Let's get after that now in the Public Square.
Yeah, we're grateful to The Atlantic and to Rose Horowitz for what she's done. This is a stimulating conversation. And since The Atlantic is an organization that says they applaud and celebrate arguments, we're not arguing. We're sure having a deeply concerning conversation. Let's talk about alternatives. I want to be careful because this article is quite significant. The subject is quite significant. But what I heard you say is get them to a book. And then it seems like that's where the fight is, the distractions to get them to a book. Am I getting it right?
You're spot on. And
Okay.
I think the wave of changing state laws about cell phones and schools going to cell phone free, I think you will, if we can stick to that, I think you will start to see a change in the trend. But the other problem is the technology is used as a learning tool as well. And I don't think we can just throw out computers and obviously their iPads and internet.
What does that mean, though, the technology is used as a learning tool? Help me with that.
AI. How do we, from all of it? Because we all know in society, the technology is what's moving us forward. We can't throw it out. But at the same time, the solutions, I think, are how do you balance that? How do you teach kids critical thinking at a young age and then start to introduce it? There are teachers talking about this all across the nation in my lunchroom every day. How do we continue that? We can't just ignore technology and let other countries zoom ahead, but at the same time, you have to be able to think, how are you going to know what is truth? The kids really don't know. And if you AI your notes, but you don't know where the source of truth is, then how do you know what you're learning?
Brings us back to Horowitz's premises. You can't
Yes.
think for yourself.
Well, speaking of truth, her premise is, the age of reading is over. Well, I would say, no, it's never going to be over because God gave us a book. And if we want to know him, you've heard this a million pastors say this, if you want to know God, then you should read his book. Reading is never going to be over because there's going to be something in the hearts and minds of every human that's going to have to look up and ask questions. And in his book, you find those answers.
I have shared this before, but my dad, when I was young, like 7, 8, 9 years old, knew how to read. He would pay us money to read
I was going to bring
chapters
this up
in the Bible.
Yes.
And in it, he didn't just, hand us 50 cents for a chapter. He asked us questions about what we read. And so I maybe I'm just a master of the obvious or my mind is just too simple, but I think it would be really cool to figure out a way off tech to get kids to be in a book club where they are reading something of substance and they can discuss it, maybe in a group of 5 or 6 kids at a time, or pick different groups, pick different books or whatever. But to be able, my husband is in a book club and he enjoys it. He reads collectively with 3 other guys and they discuss it.
We are not above bribery in our house. So Papa pays for books in our house.
That's
so
great.
we have a grandfather who will go unnamed when my girls finish reading a book, they get $1. And they start with the little books and then they get to the story books. And then you get to an age where you got to read a chapter book, like you gotta earn it a little bit. But there's things like that to get kids motivated. I mean, I'm talking about smaller kids, but I'm sure there's things you could do for older kids too to lessen the distractions of this world.
Yep.
Right. You want to be on a softball team? Read this book. You want to join a soccer team? Read this book.
If you want to marry my daughter, you got to read the Declaration of Independence, C.S. Lewis's
that
Mere
happened.
Christianity, and a few others. So, you can do this for all ages.
I think their future spouse should have to memorize and recite it personally.
And by the way, if you don't quite know that illustration, let's go back just a week and take a look at that wonderful celebration of Declaration 250 to see what the recitation by memory of the Declaration sounds like with a 10-year-old. Rachel, you hopeful, optimistic? I mean, you're 22 years in school. I don't see you pulling your hair out saying, I can't take this anymore. These people are too stupid to be educated.
I would agree with. I think that the youth of America has so much to gain and opportunity, but I think as adults, we really have to get a rein on leading them. And I'm in that mix. And I think the solution, like I said before, we do have to meet them where we are. And that's where I love your idea of reading a book and getting $1. And I hear Rob yelling Remember the Pizza Hut when you would read so many books and you got a personal pan pizza?
That was really
pays
cool.
$1.
That's
My
child of the
Book
80s.
it. Book it.
my grandkids got me up to $2 now on the chapter books. So I don't know what this is dollar
Inflation.
business.
And
It's
yeah.
out of control.
Yes. And it's society. And I kind of told Rob, I said, we have so much in some ways. And would my kids read books for a little pizza? I don't know. But I do know that teaching high school, there are ways from young to old to get kids learning and to get them into books. But the more we do give them the devices, our chances are going down. So I think we need to find ways to engage them.
So we should really have an article written about how have we let our kids down
Yes.
by permitting so many distractions and so little motivation. Well, it comes back to sort of the grown-ups in the room.
It does. And I think, I do hope that everyone will continue reading. And Anna makes a great point with the Bible. Talk about having to comprehend. That's a great challenge for everyone. Not everyone's reading the Bible, though. And we need to continue reading.
God decided to reveal himself as the Word of God. And you're right. That book is written. I don't care what we do with it from a technological perspective. That book's down. It's there. There's 66 of those books there. And those books are still the pathway to life.
Can I make a recommendation for all the parents out there wondering, how can I get my child into a book? So if you're a history teacher, a great series, I still use it myself, printed from the 1950s to about 1970. It's called the Landmark Book Series. Any topic in American history and a lot of world history, I still use it myself. And it's written for about a fourth grade reading level. The other thing is, like I said, Classics Illustrated. They tried to bring that back in a hardback edition
Jeff,
a few years ago.
I've read some of those to my girls.
And it's famous literature like the Count of Monte Cristo, and it's excellent.
Well, something that my daughter has taught me, because, Jeff, in what you're talking about, I can just see the imagination surging from your eyes when you talk about these books. This article points out the fact that when a child is reading a book or a book is being read to a child, as opposed to seeing imagery, that a whole different portion of the brain is stimulated and activated, and it's a much more valuable and enjoyable experience to read it or have it read to you than sort of the lazy way out with massive stimulation of the brain in regards to video. Now, as a guy who really loves cartoons, I got to tell you, that's telling me something, but that there's power in that, isn't there?
There is. And I read to my kids because I saw my parents do that with me. And my mom taught me how to read. And Melanie, you gave me the tools to teach my girls the phonetics. We talked about that a couple segments ago, to teach them. And I want to just share this little story because it I don't know, hopefully it'll put a smile on your face. We read one of those illustrated classics like Little Women.
Yeah,
okay?
they're great.
And they're great because they're very kid friendly. With Little Women in particular, they kind of give you the first act, not the second act of that story. So one day we started watching the movie Little Women, and my girls see on the screen the rest of the story. They go, Mom, that didn't really happen. That wasn't in the book. And I go, oh, no, it actually is in the book, but it's just in the really big book. They go, well, that's not in our book. I said, I know it's a kid version, it's a children's version. It's abridged. They're like, well, we wanna read the whole thing.
All right.
Busted.
You're holding back.
I'm like, it's a little big. I mean, it's something that I kind of struggle through. And so I read that, me and my husband, we read aloud Little Women, and it was dense. There were times where I didn't know what it was saying, but we read the whole thing to them, and they listened to it. Oh. They did. They truly did.
Great conversation today. Panel, thank you all so much. Rachel, thanks for sitting in and putting Rob in the back bench here today.
Anytime.
You're welcome anytime.
Hey, Wayne, I got to tell you, we're around not only a bunch of people who love to read, but we're around with authors as well.
Yeah.
When you visit us at the Public Square, there are lots of books and kids on the square that can help you in this process.
And just one more thing, if you did not grow up reading, you can break the cycle. You can break the cycle for your family and for your kids. So just a final thought there. Thanks for listening to the Public Square.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.